So welcome everyone. Thank you very much for coming here. It's a real pleasure hosting this WiTT event in relation to travel tech. There's a lot happening, as we are going to see. And in terms of the format, I have the great pleasure of chairing this session with this very distinguished guest involved in the travel tech industry. We are going to go through the session for 45 minutes to an hour, and then there'll be questions for people from the audience at the end. So a few words about the event and what our distinguished guests will be speaking about. The travel industry has known a really big evolutions recently. They've really embraced technology, and technology to do a number of things, either to make the customer experience better, or as we are going to hear about, to solve problems like impact on the environment. It is quite interesting to see the variety that we are going to discuss today in terms of impacts on travel. And by this we mean not just I'm going to go on holiday travel, but we also mean, I need to business travel. Or also, I need to travel from A to B in a city. This kind of travel. In this respect, and just to show the width of what we're speaking about, I was going to go a little bit analog. I do like reading the paper version of Time Out every week. I'm an avid reader. Last week, my dream came true. It was the AI version of Time Out. And now I love AI, so this was really good for me. What was really interesting is they had an article listing 19 ways in which AI is going to change London in the coming years. And out of this, more than a third related to travel and travel tech, whether it is Transport for London, whether it is Heathrow, whether it is electric vehicles, smart cities, this kind of thing. So it's really an exciting field. Without further ado, I want to introduce our panelists. We have first Lucy Amortegui, who is in business development for Future Visual. We have then Rubina Singh, who is an advisory expert for Solar Impulse Foundation. And we have next Athina, who is involved in 5G tourism for Mativision. And finally, we have Andrew Jordan, who is CTO at Carlson Wagonlit Travel. So just starting with you, Lucy. So Lucy, you work for Future Visual, which aims at developing VR and AR solutions across sectors, but you've been involved particularly in the travel industry. If you wouldn't mind explaining what you're doing, and there's a slide there.
So yes, I'm Lucy. I work at Future Visual, which is a VR AR studio. I think first disclosure, I'm not a VR AR expert. This is a relatively new field for me. I've only been working with Future Visual since December, but I'm super excited about the possibilities that it brings. My experiences of VR and AR before I joined were kind of gimmicky things in museums or maybe at trade shows, and nothing really resonated that much. But what I'm really excited about is now seeing the real business challenges that it can solve. My career, I've always worked in kind of the new things, worked across media, broadcast and marketing, and it feels like I was working at the BBC when iPlayer was just launching. I can remember saying to friends, you're actually going to be watching telly on your phones in the future, and this was before we had smartphones, and it was all about the little Nokias, and everyone was kind of like, yeah, right. But I kind of feel the same about VR and AR. The world is going to change massively in the next kind of 10 years, and I really think that VR and AR are going to play a huge part in that. So this is us at Future Visual. We're a really small team based in Brighton of developers. Boomer the dog is in the centre because he's a big part of the team. We've been around for 4 years and have a client list including IATA, Ferrari, John Lewis and R-Loop. We create content and we also have developed a platform called Vision XR which enables multi-user, multi-device collaboration. That means you can join from your mobile phone using the VR headset from a tablet and you can all meet in the same immersive space. So collaboration is a real thread that runs through everything that we do. When I joined, I was really kind of overwhelmed by the amount of not different, but kind of interchangeable definitions of VR and AR. And I really liked the way the team at Future Visual talk about it, so I thought I'd share that with you. As I said, one of our clients is John Lewis, and that's kind of a really good way to explain it. So we see the first space as being reality. So that's when you walk into the high street store, you can look at the furniture, you can touch it, you can sit on the chairs, you can really experience it. The second space is online, so you might be able to see the whole product range online, but you don't get quite the same feeling. You aren't able to sit on the sofas or to really kind of have a feeling of what the products look like. With the third space, which is what we see VR and AR being, is a mix of these two. You have the benefit of being able to see a wide range of product, but you also have the ability to kind of see this in the real world. So for John Lewis, for example, they were launching a new product range, and it's quite difficult in a showroom to have all the sofas and all the chairs in all the colours. Of course, you can... But with VR, you're able to do that. You're able to walk into a space, into a living room. You're able to look at what the chairs look like. You're able to move them around. You're able to see with light and dark. So you really get that immersive extra experience. So, a Future Visual, I think there's so many different applications for VR and AR, but what we tend to focus on is marketing, behavior change, and training. And I'll talk you through a little bit about each of those. Marketing, so we work directly with brands, but we also work with agencies. This is an example of Ferrari. We worked with them to create an AR app, so for the hospitality lounge, people could practice having a ride in a car and customising it. We worked directly with Ferrari for that. We also work with agencies like Iris Worldwide, and we created a Shop of the Future for Barclays, which is on a tablet. When you go in, you can kind of have a look around what a store of the future might look, hover over different items and see how much they would cost and what your loan repayments and things would be like. It's all about the money. Behaviour change is super fascinating. You won't find anything about this on our website, which is often the case with super exciting projects because it's classified. But a behavioural psychologist came to us and said, can VR and AR help show people's true behaviours? You know, when people come and talk to me, they kind of say what I want them to hear in a business environment. But if you strip them away, put them in a really out of their comfort zone space, how's that going to play out? So we created a game and people were enabled to, when they were out of their comfort zone, they were kind of embodied as robots. Some different behaviours really did come out, so that was really fun. A little bit of what that looked like. So training is where we really kind of merge in with the travel industry. It's our kind of first piece of work within the sector. I think training is an area within VR that has really, the benefits are really becoming to be known. One thing that we say VR is really good for is for those situations that are prohibitively expensive or physically difficult to recreate, and that really worked for us in travel. So we work with IATA, the International Air Transport Association, and they came to us with a challenge with their ground staff. Ground staff training was done in the classroom, which was limited. Actually, they wanted to be out on the aircraft testing things out, but it was really expensive to do this and really time-consuming and just sometimes dangerous. In VR, we were able to recreate what the ground staff needed to know. So, for example, when the plane lands, you need to do a whole series of checks for errors and hazards. Hopefully, you're never going to find any, but you need to know what they're like. So in VR, you're able to not only have a whole range of hazards and errors that you probably wouldn't get to see in real life, but you can see different light conditions, different weather conditions. So within kind of an hour's training, you could learn what could take you potentially years to actually experience in real life. So there's a few shots of this. So how it was, you'd be fully immersed with your headset into the scene. You would have a checklist that goes through. All the data is captured for what you've, the pieces of the modules that you've passed. You can pause at any time to reflect and have a look at manuals if you need some extra help. But it really enables you to see all the different conditions that are happening outside. Why they chose it in the end? Because it was super expensive for them to go and actually have people out looking at the aircraft. Again, as I said about the weather conditions, and it was also proving a faster route to competency. It's known now that if you experience something, you learn it quicker. So with VR, that enables that to happen. So Another thing with VR and AR, when you Google and look, there's 100 statistics of how much money it's going to be and what the uptake is going to be. So just to pick a couple of them, by the end of 2019, there will be over 2 billion smartphones enabled with AR capabilities. And you can see the stats about the value of the market. Travel is no exception. It seems to be one area that's actually accelerating quite quickly in this area. We probably work kind of almost behind the scenes, if you like. Our work with IATA is all with the ground staff, so that's what's happening to the plane. So we've all been there when we need to get on the plane and we're waiting for that quick turnaround. IATA are trying to speed that up by making sure their ground staff are the best that they can be. We're also working with R-Loop, and that's about a globally distributed engineering team. For them, that's about kind of designing the engines of things. And using VR, you're able to be in different locations and work on things in different places, which not only saves time and money, but it's also great for the environment because it's reducing your carbon footprint. This is an example of Vision XR, the platform that enables us to do this. So as you can see, the little avatars there, these could be people. I did a demo yesterday and we had someone in the US, someone in the UK, England and Scotland. Each of these different avatars working on the same immersive space, working on a piece of equipment, being able to make quick decisions about design and technology without having to be in the same physical space. So a quick look at the other side of the lens of what, from kind of more of the touristic side. Again, there's so many different examples, but kind of the maybe four areas that jumped out at me. It's kind of the try before you buy market. The idea that you can go into a Thomas Cook store and put on a headset and have a look at the destination. Thomson tried this with Samsung and they had a 40% increase in ROI within 3 months of doing this. It's rumoured that Airbnb are looking at AR. So when you're scanning which house you want to go and visit, you can actually have not only just the flat pictures, you can have a walk around the apartment. You can see the idea of simulation of sites. So of course things like space or World Heritage sites, but there's also things like fragile environments, so going to look at a coral reef that actually you can't do because you're damaging the environment. And then there was a really fun article that I read just this week about a retirement home that's taking headsets in for the people who, they're never going to be able to skydive anymore, but they always wanted to do it. This kind of wellness thing with their residents putting on their headsets. There's been examples of in-flight entertainment with VR. It doesn't feel that long ago when you can remember hoping you got that seat so you could get the best view of the television in the aisle. Now we're all, we're ready for it in the screen in front, but I don't think it's going to be long before we're going to have our goggles on. So yeah, a number of airlines have been using it as a first-class privilege. That could be moving forward. And then the re-experience market, again, moving on years ago when people had slideshows about what they did on holiday. Now you can see how people put it on Facebook and Instagram. There's a whole market for that, to have that as kind of more of an immersive experience. So finally, where can this go? Every day there's different examples. I was reading today about an AR app where you can measure the size of your baggage to check that it fits in the... Yeah, so because every airline has a slightly different size, so you scan your luggage. So there's all these applications that are coming forward. I read something as well that was about reflecting about how maybe the industry hasn't got to where people thought that it was going to get to it, and what's this about. And someone was saying it's how you think about it. There was nobody who was successful when they worked in a .com business. They were successful when they worked in a travel business or a book-selling business. And that's the same way. I think it's about not thinking about, what can we use VR and AR for? It's about what business challenges do we have that VR and AR can solve. And with that being our starting point, I think it's kind of a limitless journey right now.
Well, that's very interesting. I particularly like the training option and the angle about heritage site. I recently visited Stonehenge, and we decided to take the option when you visit the stones really early in the morning. It was obviously extremely cold, so with 2 young children that was not ideal. And I think I've read since that there are VR experience where you can visit Stonehenge with. You can even paint it if you want, if that's what you would like to do. So that's quite exciting. And so when I hear about all these potentials, which is really huge, what has been for you really the barriers? What is stopping more VR?
I think some of it has been, some of it's just been a bit of confusion. Yeah. Some of it have people having not the great experiences. Some of it the cost of the hardware, but as we're moving into the second generation, I think that's changing. And I think AR is probably going to really take off because we all have smartphones. So actually, there's a lot of a quicker route to market, and there's so many applications. It's really about, so much of business challenges now are about enhancing customer experience. So with this in our pocket, there's no end of what experience we can do.
And which area do you see the strongest possibility or the strongest growth for AR and VR?
I think training is a key one. Yeah, training has really, I think because of the actual feeling of that experience and the proof that you know if you experience something, you learn it that much quicker. And it's just that idea of having the real need and the understanding of the customer and thinking how you can fix that problem.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Okay.
That was really interesting. Now, Rubina, over to you. So, Rubina, you're an advisory expert for the Solar Impulse Foundation, who is trying to look at mixing the economy and the ecology and making it work, making sustainable travel using solar, electrical, etc. So, can you explain to me a little bit more about what you're doing and how this is changing the industry?
Thanks, Anne. Hi, everyone. I'm Rubina Singh. And so basically, currently in my profession, I wear two hats. The first one is I'm currently working at Centrica Business Solutions, where I lead on developing joint go-to-market strategy with strategic partners globally on launching energy solutions. So basically bringing together solar storage and electric vehicles to help and enable the energy system of the future. And I am also an advisory expert at the Solar Impulse Foundation. And today I'll be wearing my second hat. So let me tell you a little more about that. So this foundation was set up after the first solar power flight around the world with the aim of finding 1,000 clean as well as profitable solutions which can protect the environment. And I, along with the other experts, help assess as well as help advise on improving these sustainable solutions. So just a little bit about my background. My background's in energy systems engineering, and I started my career as at Fraunhofer Center in Boston as a solar engineer, where I was basically working on tech development and innovation in solar technologies. I then moved on to heading Fraunhofer Tech Bridge, which is an open innovation program to help fund and commercialize clean tech startups. And 2 years ago, I moved here to the UK, where I started working as a strategy consultant, setting up the EV division for my former company. And that's when I started focusing on electric vehicles. And since then, I've helped organize multiple cross-industry workshops on EVs, bringing together the different key stakeholders to help understand what the challenges are and address and enable the potential uptake of EVs. So today, I'll basically talk about technology trends in green transport. Perfect. So this is a picture of a Solar Impulse 2, which was the first solar-powered flight around the world that took place in 2015. And this plane covered around 40,000 kilometers, starting in Abu Dhabi, and then flying to Asia, America, and Europe, and then landing again in Abu Dhabi. It was covered with more than 17,000 solar cells, as you can see in the picture here, along with the battery, which helped enable it by solar power alone through the nights as well. So there was absolutely no fuel used on this plane. And it really did fly around the world. So this is a picture of the Solar Impulse flying over Hawaii. And what this shows is the incredible things that are possible if you use clean technologies. And the Solar Impulse did inspire a lot of innovation, and some of that we can see today. So I'm going to quickly show you two of these innovation trends, so electric vehicles, and then I'll briefly touch upon electric aircrafts. So the electric vehicle market has grown exponentially over the past 8-9 years, and we have more than 2 million EVs being sold globally in 2018 alone. And here you can see a few statistics for some of the leading EV markets across the world. And as you can observe, China is by far ahead of the rest of the world with more than 1 million electric vehicles on its roads today. Now, we know it's a big country, but this only happened in the past few years, so it's fantastic progress. In the US, there are around 700,000, and here in the UK, we have a little less than 200,000 today. So in terms of charging these cars, are we developing enough infrastructure to help support and enable this uptake of EVs? Because with conventional cars today, you can drive up to a petrol station and fill it up. But with electric vehicles, you need dedicated charging stations to provide the electricity to help charge up the batteries. So I estimated the publicly accessible charge points to the ratio of the publicly accessible charge points to EVs. And China's actually doing pretty well in this regard as well, with roughly one publicly accessible charging point for every 6 EVs. Here in the UK, it's 1:10, which isn't great, but there is a lot of push from the government as well as industry in terms of investment and innovation, both in EV technologies and the charging infrastructure to support it. So the third statistic you see here, that's the market share of sales for EVs. So despite all this growth that we're seeing, as you can see here, it's still around 2% for most of the countries, with the exception of Norway, where it's 40%. And these are 2018 stats. So today, Norway is around 50%, so half of the cars sold there are EVs. And it's one of the world's success stories. But what makes it so successful? So in the case of Norway, it's mainly been policies. So the government launched really strong policies as early as 1990s to help support and enable the uptake of EVs, and a lot of financial and non-financial incentives for the consumers. And this is what's driven the market, literally. So we can see that there's been significant progress all over the world, but there's still a long way to go. So when do we see mass adoption of EVs? There are quite optimistic projections, actually, which are getting revised every year. And National Grid's future energy scenarios predicts that we can have 25 million electric vehicles here in the UK alone by 2035. So things are looking very promising here. Now let's take a look at electrification in the skies. So, sorry. So currently there are 170 electrically propelled aircrafts under development all over the world. As you can see here, most of it's happening in North America and Europe. And these are focusing on both intracity and intercity travel. So 60% of these are focusing on the urban air mobility sector, which is, in a sense, is flying cars. So today, we are closer than we've ever been before to a Jetsons like future, if any of you remember the show. So now you're probably wondering, when will this actually be a reality? When do we see flying cars? So surveys conducted by Roland Berger expect that we can have urban air mobility as soon as the mid-2020s in some parts of the world. But a flight like London to Paris, for example, would be as early as 2032 or the mid-2030s. There are obviously, of course, there are quite a few challenges here as well, but there are a lot of drivers and there's a lot of exciting stuff happening in the electrification of transport. Now, I know this might look a little ambitious and some of you might be skeptical. So before I end, I want to show you 2 pictures. So this is a picture of Fifth Avenue in New York City on Easter Day in 1900. And as you can see, most of the, I'm not sure if you can see it properly, but the roads mainly filled with horse-driven carriages because that was the main mode of transport then. And maybe you can see one car there that's been circled in red. And now let's fast forward a few years and see what happened maybe on the same day on the same road. So this is a picture, same road, or only around a decade later. And as you can see, it's filled with cars. Do you see any horses here? So what this shows is that it only took around a decade and the way we travel is completely disrupted. And coincidentally, the mid-2030s, which is around the time when we're expecting a lot of the developments that I talked about earlier, also happens to be a decade from now. So to me, it seems like, again, we're at this exciting junction where the way we travel is about to be disrupted, and now it's just about making it a reality. So I'm going to leave you with that.
Thank you very much, Rubina. That was really exciting. I personally, I would love to own an electric vehicle. I have my eyes on the Tesla. And a flying Tesla, that would be really awesome on so many levels. Now, obviously, there's a number of drivers of rapid uptake of EVs. We know in London, for example, that the ultra-low emission zone is now in operation, and if you have an electric vehicle, you don't have to pay. So can you speak a little bit more about what are the drivers of this very rapid evolution, which we have seen in the numbers?
Sure. So for electric vehicles, there have been quite a few drivers actually. I think one of the biggest one has been the global decarbonization agenda. So the realization that climate change is real, it's happening. And different governments across the world having CO2 emission targets. And here in the UK itself, the Climate Change Act, which has helped drive it. Along with that, there have been regulatory push from the government, a lot of different incentives and policies which are also pushing this, the uptake of EVs. And then there's the trend in battery storage. So electric vehicles are essentially moving batteries, or batteries on wheels. And the cost of battery has fallen by 70% since 2010. So that's helping make it a little more competitive and in parity with ICEs. And then I think there's support from the OEMs or the automakers as well. And of course, Tesla, which came in, and it not only did it make electric vehicles sexy, it made sustainability, it brought it into fashion, which I absolutely love. And I think along with it, there's a lot of innovation happening just in terms of the cars, but also in the energy system in general, because with electric vehicles, it's no longer a transport question. It's about the electricity grid. How do you charge it? Where's the electricity coming from? It's the infrastructure. So it's about innovation happening in the industry in general, which I think is driving it.
And I think you're touching there on the point about challenges. Personally, I think that if I was going to invest into anything, I would invest in lithium. Speak to us about some of the challenges about the widespread. You've mentioned the structure of the grid, but speak to us more generally about this.
Sure. So I know I mentioned falling battery costs, but that is also one of the challenges because EVs are still quite expensive. If you look at the gorgeous Tesla, it's only £70,000. But besides that, I think in terms of the consumer experience, because what's actually going to enable widespread adoption of EVs is the consumers thinking that this is the way to go. And right now, in terms of interoperability, by which I mean driving an EV from north of England all the way down, you can't do it on one charge because consumers are anxious about the range an electric vehicle will cover. And then there are charging stations along the way, but do you have access to it? So there are lots of different networks and you don't have seamless access to it. So I feel addressing some of those issues along with having a seamless infrastructure, strong infrastructure, which helps it, could really help drive the uptake of EVs, but these are some of the challenges that are still there. And then finally, I'd actually like to say cross-sector collaboration, because right now there's the transport industry, there's the energy industry, and infrastructure, and they haven't really worked that much together in the past. But now to make this happen, everyone needs to collaborate and work together to create a more integrated system. So.
Well, that's definitely a lot of food for thought in the future. So we've seen VR and AR. We've now seen the electric vehicle, the green options, and all the tech that's going into this. And now Athina. Now, Athina, you work for Mativision, and you've been involved in a very exciting project organized by the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, also known as the Minister of Fun. They're running a number of 5G trials. You've got 5G urban, you've got 5G rural with the connected cars, and you've also got 5G smart tourism on which you've been involved. So if you want to talk to us a bit more about that.
Yes. So hello everyone, I'm Rubina. My background is a bit more into design than actually technology, but I got really familiar with technology and immersive technology specifically when I started working with Mativision. I'm going to talk to you about our participation in the 5G Smart Tourism project, about delivering synchronous immersive content to a group of people. And I'm going to explain later on through my slides so that you can actually understand what this is. So I can start by saying who is Mativision. So we are a company that deliver and produce and deliver 360 interactive experiences and immersive applications like AR, MR, VR, all the kind of R's that are there. So the company started focusing on this area since 2012, and we have been working on projects from live entertainment to medical training to enterprise training, and we had customers such as Facebook, Unilever, Novartis, MTVs, and others that I cannot recall at the moment. So moving on to because I know that time is of the essence, and I have a video that I would like to show you. I will start talking about the project. In 2018, we decided to participate in the 5G Smart Tourism project in order to make our platform technology 5G enabled. So we have a technology that delivers immersive content to many and multiple devices synchronously. That means everyone is watching the same thing at the same time. So this, with the existing technology, has been quite challenging, I would say. It demands a bit more of infrastructure and a lot of time to get prepared. So we wanted to test the 5G low latency and data sources so that we can actually see if it can perform better than than the existing technologies. So we recorded some immersive content from I'm gonna open it so that you can read. So we recorded some events in Bristol, that is Pride Parade and Harbour Day Festival, and we edit the content into an immersive experience. And then mid-March, we presented the whole content to groups of people with the help of a narrator who would be their virtual tour guide. And everyone was wearing their headset, experiencing Bristol in that time. The key point to that was that everyone was watching the same thing at the same time. The devices were totally synchronized, maintaining the synchronicity and a high quality of image. More. Apart from that, we supported another use case that was on a landmark application. That was on an application that had recorded content geolocked, so people could actually move around the city, and on the specific locations they could use their app to retrieve a virtual tour guide. So you could actually raise your phone, and instead of looking let's say a building, an empty building, you could see the same building, but you could also see a person there, a virtual person that doesn't exist in your reality, who was talking to you and was explaining to you what this building is and was telling all the story about it. So through this project, we worked mostly with 5G for the low latency, as I said before, and the maintenance of the high quality of the images. And we had great results. We saw people were much more engaging with the content. So imagine if we could use it right now and I had headsets for each one of you. And when you're wearing the headset, you cannot actually see each other because you're having a personal experience, but you know that you're in the same room. You can feel that you have someone next to you, and people started commenting to each other. They were interacting with the narrator, and it was really, really engaging for them, and they gave us a really good feedback. So we collaborated with InterDigital and the Digital Catapult for this project, and they helped us quite a lot, I would say. And this is a short video so that you can see how our project developed, let's say. So you're gonna see videos and images from the day of the final showcase and how this experience was delivered to the groups of people who were coming to see us. Some have already tried it. The rest you can try later. This is from the London final showcase of the 5G in the digital catapults offices here in Kingsbridge. And you will see some testimonials from users and from some market experts about the project.
I didn't notice any latency, let's put it that way, but and the 360 experience I think is a very good way of testing that. It makes you realise the shortcomings of the hardware, but you know, it was impressive.
So here we are in Bristol today in March, and it is amazing to see what Mativision has been demonstrating. It is not just the capabilities of the application and the technology that they already are very well known for, but it is their capability to effectively demonstrate the difference between what their technology can deliver as an experience to the end user over a 5G versus a non-5G network, making it very, very clear on what 5G can effectively deliver for them and for their product roadmap in the future.
And the showcase that Mativision developed is particularly opportune to showcase the idea of concurrent access to a video in the tourist guide, where we have the opportunity to send multicast responses to the individual participants in the tourist experience.
Our aim is to deliver synchronized video to groups of people at the same place, and the limitation we have at the moment is that the existing networking technologies do not allow us to both stream the content directly to the devices and synchronize the devices in an absolute perfect way. So what we hope that we will prove with the 5G networking is that we can use the extended capability and performance of the 5G network as well as the low latency to both control the synchronization of the devices as well as streaming directly to them.
This Mativision use case is a classic example of what can be done with 5G technology. I mean, the use case without 5G is certainly not the same as what it was when we had the 5G turned on. I think that the lower latency, the video quality was so much better. Mativision has done a really good job of delivering this use case on the platform, and it's a fantastic application. It's going to go a long way.
So that was mostly about the 5G projects, and what we saw and we realized is that it is a real-time application that can be applied with existing technology, but we believe that with the 5G will be much better. So it can one thing that we have to point out is the fact that it is an application that can be applied both remotely but also on site. So you can actually have someone who cannot travel and who, for medical conditions or for any kind of conditions, be transferred to a place and enjoy something that he would like, or also be introduced to Bristol's history, or Manchester, or anywhere else in the world, and so that it can trigger his need, let's say, to go and travel there. So apart from that, you have the on-site application that is based a bit more on the AR and how you can enhance the experience of a traveler in any place. So that's mostly for me.
Thank you very much, Athina. That was really fascinating. And I think the 5G angle is really crucial here. We speak a lot about 5G, but I think the technology is there, and it's how much 5G enhance. And you were speaking about the experience of the travelers. Now, I had the great idea a few years ago to spend some money on the headset that you can buy at Eurostar, and it's supposed to you put it on your children's head, and then they're supposed to experience like being underwater or something, which was a fantastic idea. Silence at last. But for the fact that I don't know if you've ever been on the Eurostar and tried to use your mobile phone, right? So let's just say that even with their Wi-Fi, the experience was not being conclusive, and it resulted in more complaints from my children than actually solving the problem. So I think what you've been trying to demonstrate with this use case is how 5G would have been crucial. And what, in terms of learning, other than the difference between 4G and 5G, what were you learning through this experience?
So the most important thing is that we reassured the fact that the network can actually perform in a very good and high quality. And starting when we first started working with the 5G technology, we didn't really know what it is. So we have the technical idea, but until the point that you actually start working in it and apply it on your actual platform, you don't really know how it works. So it was really productive for us and for our development of our platform, and it also gave us, let's say, a future exploitation idea of what we could do with it. So we would ideally be ready when the 5G is ready for everyone. We would have the platform that is ready and has a product to actually be used on.
Fantastic. And what are the challenges, do you think, for this immersive technology, and what's stopping it, or what could do better?
One very important thing about immersive technologies is that now they are becoming, let's say, a trend. People are listening about them, but not many of them have already tried them. So we might have read some things, maybe some applications through our mobile phones, but people don't really know what immersive technology is and don't really know how it can be applied. The thing is that this kind of technology is ready. It can have some applications now to have some products now on the market, but the industry is not ready yet and well trained, let's say, to accept it and see what are the potentials. There are platforms that are running. Mativision has been collaborating with many companies, but we see that the industry still hesitates on taking over the VR, AR, and all the R's, as I said before.
Yeah. So it's again a similar case to what Rubina is saying. In 10 years' time, things will be different. So now, moving on to you, Andrew. So Andrew is CTO of Carlson Wagonly Travel, which is a travel agency company, essentially managing business travel, meetings and events for companies, for governments, for NGOs, and Andrew is in charge of all the technologies. So could you tell us a bit more about this?
So I think before we get on to talking about CWT, I'll just kind of pull back a little bit and ask a couple of questions in the room. So put your hand up if you don't have a smartphone. Okay, and put your hand up if you don't have broadband at home. Okay, so that's quite an interesting kind of straw poll for a room of however many people we are, 60 people. That level of connectivity has happened in just over a decade. So if we went back to the mid-2000s, there was no such thing as a smartphone. Broadband was really only fairly nascent, particularly at home. And what that's done to, I think, society generally is it's created a very, very different set of expectations. So we're now in a world that is hyper-connected. And in fact, we're now in a world that the generations coming up behind us have never lived in a world that wasn't hyper-connected. And increasingly so, that connectivity is arriving in places it never used to be. Many modern cars now just come with SIM cards built into them, so they're already connected. They're an extension of the Internet of Things, if you like. We're already seeing more broadband go onto aeroplanes, and in fact Delta Airlines is now trying free broadband on aeroplanes. So we're getting to the point now where that connectivity is just omnipotent, and we're kind of adjusting our behaviour because of it, and our expectations because of it. So what's all that got to do with travel, you're saying? Well, what we're seeing inside of the travel industry now is this seismic shift from a world where travel was very transactional, where people would just get their airline tickets. If you can remember far enough back, we actually got tickets to go on an aeroplane, and then they'd be on their way, and that was pretty much the only engagement that you had with a travel agency. And maybe if your flight was delayed, you might give them a call and say, "Can you help?" but that was pretty much it. Now we carry supercomputers around in our pockets. And to give you an interesting statistic, the first iPhone that came out had 10,000 times more compute power than all the computers that put the first man on the moon. And you carry it around in your pocket. And that was the first iPhone, and we're now on generation 10. So you imagine what power that gives you in terms of sensor data, information around your proximity, around what you want to experience, what you want to do. That's now finding its way into the corporate travel space, because people are now saying, it isn't just about whether you can book me a nice airline ticket or whether you can put me in a nice hotel. It's about this end-to-end experience. It's about this idea that I wake up in the morning and I've got this idea I want to go and see Bob in New York. So from the minute I've decided to go and see Bob, there's a whole cascade of information that I need access to that's very, very personal to me. You know, I never fly weekends because I want to stay home with my family. But when I do fly to New York, I want to fly out on that very first flight. I'll only ever fly with these particular airlines because I'm a status carrier. Where am I going to meet Bob? Am I going to meet him in a hotel? Am I going to meet him in a meeting room or in an office? How do I get there? I've never been to New York before. So all of this data is kind of floating through the experience, even before you've got around to booking the trip. And even when you're on trip, there's a huge amount of data that gets kind of poured over you that you then consume either through your phone or through other people giving you access to that data. You're a mile away from London Heathrow Terminal 5. Your cab driver always drops you at the North Security line, which is always the really busy one. So wouldn't it be great if your phone said, oh, when you get to Heathrow, get your driver to drop you here with a map, because that's like half the length, and suddenly you're going to go, oh, that's really handy, because that means I'm not waiting for hours walking through a security line. There's data that kind of powers things like that. Things like flight disruptions. So you're delayed coming into New York to go meet Bob, and you're stressing because there's no internet on the airline because the satellite's down, and you're going to go, what would happen if Bob, I'm not in the meeting with Bob? And then actually behind the scenes, because we know where Bob is and we know where we're going to put him in the meeting room, we've already contacted Bob and we've said, can you push the meeting back by an hour? And we've rerouted your car to take you instead to the hotel first. We're going to take you straight to the meeting. So as soon as you get data again when you land, you look at your phone and go, wow, that's actually really helpful because now I haven't missed my meeting with Bob. So these things, these experiences are becoming more and more pervasive, and the expectations of the corporate travellers that we put on the road are getting more real in that regard, that they're expecting us to do that. Now, why should we care? Well, in the travel industry, believe it or not, there are over 70,000 apps that you can download in the Android and the Apple stores that support travel. So if you don't use a channel that is provided by your company that works and does what you want it to, you're just going to go somewhere else. And that's actually having a more destructive impact on things like corporate policy. So if we all work for companies where there's a rule that says, well, you can only fly in premium economy or worse, and you can only stay in this hotel chain. There's the younger generation coming into the workforce now are actually asking in interviews, what's the company travel policy? And if they find the travel policy is not to their liking, that will be a selection or deselection criteria. So we're also seeing a softening where policy is less kind of constricting. It's more flexible around the type of experience that particularly the younger workforce want to have available to them. So it's not just good enough for us to say we can get you really good negotiated rates and we can put you in the right hotel. We've got to think about experience end to end and make that experience really, really compelling, and get to that point where the traveller's not wondering about where to go when he gets through the airport. There's already a map that says, oh, here's where the lounge is, or by the way, when you get to the lounge, this is the Wi-Fi password, so you're not hunting around for it, or this is the best route to get to your meeting because we know that there's a street down the road that's already blocked off, so you don't want to take the taxi that way. Those little sort of small differences make massive amounts of difference to an already very stressful activity, which is corporate travel. So trying to sort of create this idea of frictionless travel is a real thing for CWT now, and thinking about every little aspect all the way through the minute you think that you want to travel, all the way through the moment that you put your key in the door because you've just come home. So that whole world is actually powered by something very very forward-looking, that's actually been available for quite some time in other industries, and that's the use of data and artificial intelligence. And it was actually quite a surprise for me just over 3 years ago when I joined WiTT in this industry, because I was a newcomer to the industry, that nobody was doing anything particularly potent with data. And I'd just come from media, and media was doing loads of stuff with data, and banking before that, and they were doing loads of stuff with data, and it was like, travel's got a lot of data, so what could you do with it? Well, all of that experience that I'm talking about can be hyper-personalised when you start using inferred information about data. Using data. So if you think with most booking platforms, whether it's corporate or leisure, you tell it things about you. You know, I like staying on a high floor or a no smoking room, or I like flying with Delta or whatever it is. That's great, that kind of gets you going. But then the more you travel, the more we know about you, the more we can infer because of what you do when you're on trip. So if you always put a special order meal in for a vegetarian meal, well, guess what? We won't recommend, you know, anything other than a vegetarian meal. If you always avoid travelling the weekends, then we won't offer you a flight the weekends unless you expressly ask us for that. And every time we're doing something that feels like it's done just for you, using that power of data and AI, it begins to start to make you feel like you've almost got like a travel agent in your pocket and a supercomputer that's powering you, and everything that it's giving you is just for you, not for everyone. It's just your version of it. So that's kind of a today view of where we're starting to see the travel industry start to move towards. What I think is even more interesting is if you think about that decade from no smartphones to 100% coverage of smartphones, if this room's representative, is what about the next decade? And we're seeing some really interesting trends come out there, which is only a matter of time before they really start to take hold. Beacon technology we've already been trialling within CWT. That's the idea, frictionless travel again. You walk into Hilton in this case, and it now knows through the beacon in the lobby that you've just walked into the hotel. So your phone goes, "Oh, hello, Mr. Jordan. You're in room 149, and here's your digital key." So instead of going to that really kind of old-fashioned, let's queue up at the desk when there's 1,000 deep because there's a conference on, you just go, "Great, I'll just walk straight to my room." That type of technology is going to find its way into taxi services. So you'll get to the point where you don't even need to sort of say you've got in the taxi and got out of the taxi, because it kind of knows that. So you don't need to sort of reach into your pocket and pay, which, whilst I mention it, why do we still carry a little piece of plastic around with us to do payments with? It seems such an archaic way of carrying virtual money or electronic money. So I think that type of devices, or that type of fixed way of doing transactions will just go. So you'll just walk into a cab, your phone knows that you're now in the cab, do the journey, walk out the cab, don't need to talk to the driver if you don't really want to, and there you have frictionless travel again. So I think that's a world that we'll definitely see happen. I think blockchain, I was talking to somebody earlier just in a reception about blockchain. I've heard several commentators in this industry now say that blockchain will be the next internet. And what that means is when the internet came along, it was a bit of a slow burn. I mean, I remember the first company I worked for, there were 6 people that were around the internet, which is like, well, but I don't even know who it's for. And now you can imagine life without the internet. And I think blockchain will do the same, because it has so much applicability and extensibility, particularly inside the travel industry. I think it will actually challenge the very economic model on which this industry is built, because it can democratise and federate a lot of the way that the transactions currently are centralised, and it won't need to do that anymore without getting too technical about it. So I think blockchain has the potential to be really an interesting and highly disruptive technology for travel, not just corporate travel, but for travel generally. So I think the one thing that I would always advise whenever we think about this rapidly changing world of technology is kind of, don't be scared by it, but don't think that these things will never affect you, because inevitably they will, and it's just being ready for them when they do. And nobody could have foreseen the impact of mobile technology on the world, but it's happened. It's not going to reverse itself. We're now in that world. And when in the next 10 years, and we've got AR and VR, and electronic cars becoming more prevalent, it's just the world that we adapt to, but it's the fact that it's moving so quickly that I think is creating the biggest. I think it's the biggest frontal head-on challenge to what is a $1.5 trillion industry in the travel sector to really start to shake it up. So let's see what the future holds.
Well, that's fantastic. I quite really like the frictionless thing. So traveling with young children, having to wait in front of in the hotel lobby, not great. So I really like all of these ideas, and I would welcome the change. And if you look at the future, what exciting new things do you see? So starting with you, Andrew, what's exciting new for the future?
What, just generally, or just in travel?
In travel. Travel tech.
I like it. I like it with when technology creates paradigm shifts, and I remember when before things like Oculus came out or Gear VR, there was a thing called Google Glass. I don't know if you remember that. I've actually still got a pair. I don't know if it's working anymore. But I don't know if you remember them. There were basically a pair of specs that had a little camera built into them and a lens that you could, a bit like Terminator, you could kind of see what's going on outside. And they had rubbish battery life, I think they lasted about 2 hours. And that was a kind of a real test forerunner to where the VR movement went to. And I think it's only a matter of time before those big clunky devices become smaller and smaller, and the utility becomes easier and much easier to carry around. And I was reading a piece recently on form factor in phones, and it was off the back of, I don't know if you've seen, one of the manufacturers has brought a phone that folds up, and they've had to recall it because it doesn't work. And somebody said, well, why are we bothering with this form factor at all? Because all you need is a way to hear and a way to speak. That you don't need that at all, really. And I like the idea that could then happen, and we just discard the phone altogether. And I mean, God help us, but maybe even get to it's totally wearable. So you just like scratch your wrist, and suddenly you phone your mum. That could go wrong, couldn't it? But no, I think mobile technology for me is one of the most interesting things, which is why I was really interested to hear about the 5G stuff, because I think that in of itself is going to have a transformative effect on our lives.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Athina? What is exciting you for the future in travel?
Mostly for travel industry or the technology or the combination?
The combination.
I think for the combination mostly is to actually see these kind of technologies taking in, people getting engaged and involved with this kind of technology, and see people who cannot travel, as I said before, being able to see and have experiences that they wouldn't otherwise. And yes, I understand that this kind of technology might scare some of us because we don't really know what it is and if it's going to be really disruptive in a bad way. But I am waiting for that moment of the future that we are actually going to use this kind of technology for having better experiences and not being afraid of them.
So fantastic. What about you, Rubina?
So for me, autonomous cars. I actually can't wait for self-driving cars. I think it's going to change the way we travel, the way we live. And I think with a lot of the advancements in Internet of Things as well as smart devices, I feel like in the future my fridge could be interacting with my car, telling it when it's out of milk, it goes to the grocery store, gets it, picks me up on the way back. So I'm super excited about that.
That is definitely a great idea. All right, and what about you, Lucy?
I think for me, I'm excited and nervous in equal amounts because some of it feels like, oh my goodness, autonomous car, really? But I think the most exciting thing is the speed. It doesn't feel, the past doesn't feel that long ago when things were very different. So how quickly things are progressing and how we know it's actually all possible. Part of it is the humans adapting to what the tech can already do. So I think that's exciting, the catching up between the two.
That's definitely very exciting. Well, it's still in the analog version. There was a very interesting story about how human interacts with technology and with new technology and still in travel. There was in Singapore, they've developed this chatbot called the Bus Uncle. And it's quite a sophisticated chatbot who obviously tells you where you need to go, but also cracks on a few bad dad jokes from time to time, and engage in chit chat with you randomly on your journey. And it's said to be the perfect traveling companion. So I'm really looking forward to Transport for London developing the Cockney versions. But this being said, I just want to open to the floor, and if you have any questions, I think there's a mic here. Yeah. Right. Thank you.
I have a question regarding the frictionless travel and also about civil liberties. Because it sounds wonderful. You go in, you walk in, you go straight to your room, you don't talk to the taxi driver. But when I remember, I read in December '83 the book 1984, and you know, there are governments around the world spying on people with your mobile phone. That data is out there. And I think, what is the ethical debate around that? Because, you know, going up to your room is nice, but if somebody knows where I've been, where I spent my money, what I do, I'm actually concerned. Mm-hmm. So is that debate happening? To which extent you think that is really taken into account?
It's a great question. I'll wait for the microphone so I don't muck up the video.
Oh, my phone.
So I first encountered that question in 2007, and I was working for a company which was a subsidiary of Tesco, and they did all their data science. So they did the Tesco Club card and all of the points crunching that you got. And there was a forerunner to what's now beacon technology called RFID, and somebody had a bright idea to put an RFID into your club card, and the idea was that you'd be pushing your trolley around Tesco and there'd be a little TV on the shelf edge saying, "Oh, hello, Mr. Jordan, do you want that same bottle of beer again that you got last time?" And we did some kind of focus groups on it, and we got this massive backlash. And I remember somebody quite succinctly saying to us, "Just because you can doesn't mean you should." Mm-hmm. And having that compass that determines what you should versus what you could do is actually really important. Now, there is an overwhelming duty of care and ownership and responsibility when you start dealing with data, as our General Counsel Lauren will tell me in exhaustive detail since the aftermath of GDPR. And one of the things that we're cognizant of is not to make that experience invasive. It has to have a utility that you're willing to kind of trade for, and it can't be imposed by companies either, because I think if companies just say, "You're going to throw all your privacy away because we say so," you don't have any employees left. So I think there's an inherent duty of care to be had whenever you're managing data. I think the one trend that's good that I see is there's beginning to be a backlash around who owns whose data, and particularly, you know, I see many people leaving Facebook now from a decade of that was their only social media platform, and that's principally because of data privacy concerns. So I don't think it's owned by anyone in particular. As the person that was responsible technically for managing and curating and doing what we do with data, I'm consciously aware that we shouldn't do things that aren't done firstly in concert with our customers to make sure that they're happy that we do that. And actually that we don't do it just because we feel like doing it, we're actually doing it because there's some mutual benefit in doing it. But I do share the concern. You know, it's almost like the genie's out of the bag in a lot of ways, and it's going to be really hard to put it back in. So rather than spend the rest of your life trying to put it back in, it's saying, well, what can you do about it now it's out? Because there is so much data out in the world that, you know, you just got to do the best you can to be responsible with it. Which is probably not a great answer for you, but I think it's kind of the state of where we are.
Okay. Any other question? Yes, the lady over there at the back.
Thank you. Helen Anderson from Accenture. Actually, it's less of a question now after that excellent question from my colleague over there, but I was going to say that, just comment, I think that is really important because my question was about not only partly a data privacy lawyer, about how you ensure data privacy compliance, because so many of these technologies are about use of data, and I think we've outlined how really remarkable use of data can be. Personal experience is fantastic and can be, but that line of, frankly, what I describe to my team as creepy, you know, and it's a subjective thing of when, you know, data is useful to the point where data people are like, oh, I'm not sure I really want a company to know that, or they're tracking me round. And I think, you know, what is really important, it's really good to hear that you're thinking of, is not only, as I say, very importantly, data privacy compliance with laws, but also what are people comfortable with, because these services can be amazing, but you can end up being overbearing. I'm just thinking, I'm quite an independent traveller, and I'm not sure I'd want every service following me round. I kind of like my freedom to choose what I want and not have somebody recommending or somebody following me around virtually. So I think it's a really important thing to build in, is people's not just privacy but autonomy as well. So it's really great to hear that you're considering that as a wider sense. A lot of people talk about data privacy in a legal sense, but I think it is a wider ethical sense of what people actually want to do, because sometimes you want privacy. I mean, just like privacy, autonomy, not just convenience.
And you said a really important word there, and that's the word choice. And regardless of whether we do or we don't offer these services out to all our customers, there should always be a choice. There should always be a choice not to do it, and we have to be completely respectful of that. As an interesting anecdote, I tried to de-Google myself recently, just talking about privacy, and I was really interested how easy that would be. And the first thing you can do, which was scary as hell, was you can go onto Google now and download every piece of data they have on you. And it was when they said, we'll email you when it's finished. It could take up to 5 days. I was like, really? And the archive of what they knew on me and had on me ran into terabytes of data. It's not because I use Google and do nothing else, but it was every, like, I used to have an Android phone. It was everywhere my Android phone had been from 2011. It was search history going back years. It was every comment that I'd made on a YouTube video or on a post on one of their blogger sites that they own. I mean, and it was all nicely taxonomized and categorized, so you could actually scroll through it. And it just scared me so much that I looked for the button that said delete. And the number of times that it then says, are you sure, are you sure, are you sure? But you can actually completely eradicate your life from Google. It is possible to do it, but it just proved to me just how intertwined we are with these completely ubiquitous services. That even, and I use that as an example because that's not even a corporate example. That's just how we just run our lives now. We just go to Google.
And I was saying, you know, and you're not even like Johnny Depp or someone, you know, that's sorry, a celebrity where you can imagine how many times they're Googled and what have you. That, you know, it'd be like months of data, I think.
So yeah, probably.
Any other questions?
Oh. Sorry, who is it?
No, I'm just asking any other question. One here.
Okay.
And I think there's some at the back.
You're getting a lot of exercise. This is our third member of the WiTT board. Right.
Hello. Yeah, I was late. Sorry. A question to Andrew. How do companies like yours survive, given everything's becoming so much more self-service and easy, and everyone knows where we are all the time and can, you know, give us whatever we need without us even realizing it? How do companies like yours actually survive through this?
That's another good question. Let me try and give you a fairly succinct answer to that. I think the first is what I was saying about moving away from it being a purely transactional business, which is a really hard thing to do because that's the way it's always been for decades. And what we're actually finding is that there's a strong desire to think more about travellers. In fact, we have a marketing description of it called business to business for employees. We're actually putting the employees back into the picture. Amazing revelation, you've got employees that actually you care about. But the whole point of it, to be serious about it, is we're looking at the employee and saying, how do you actually care about them when they're travelling? You know, how do you make sure that you don't put them in an unsafe hotel, or how do you make sure that they're not rooted in a car down somewhere that's unsafe? How do you make sure that if they're disrupted, that they can get back on the road without being stranded in an airport at midnight somewhere? How do we make sure that policy is kept up to date? Because most companies still have a policy for, you know, greater or worse. But how do you make sure they're kept up to date with current trends, so that if somebody says it's actually safer for 4 women to go and stay in an Airbnb together than it is to put them in a hotel in a strange part of town, then don't make your company policies block that. So there's lots of ways that we're moving the conversation away from it being transactional, and actually putting the employee right at the centre of it also addresses other things like employee welfare. So here's a good use of data for you. We did some extensive studies in real data to look at very frequent travellers, and it's probably no surprise to say that if you travel too much, you start getting ill. And what we found, which is really interesting, was that there was a very gradual kind of increase of very sort of minor ailments, and it suddenly just went like that. And it's a thing called walking pneumonia, which most people who get it just feel like it's a head cold. And you know, sometimes you stop off a long haul flight, you're a bit bunged up, and you know you feel a bit ill because it's been recycled air. And we were looking at that and seeing what the correlation between that and medical insurance claims were for people who are now off work long-term sick, because they just didn't realise that they were that ill. So imagine a situation where if we know that through the pattern of travel they're approaching the point at which they could start getting seriously ill, then we notify the company and say you might want to sort of look at this twice, or even send someone for a health screening, which costs you $20,000, not $2 million in an insurance claim. You're in a very different world where you're showing that you care about the employees. And similarly, looking at much more complex patterns of data to give people a much more sympathetic way to travel, so you're not forcing them to be away from their families for too long. Outside of that, we're also looking at ways through that frictionless thing of making them more productive, so they're not having to do things they're forced to do because security is, you know, it takes 2 hours to get through, and you know, you feel that you can't work because you're scrunched in a seat like this. So there's a whole shifting sort of conversation now, which is actually more important to people like the CFO and the CEO, because they're saying that you're actually looking out for our employees now rather than just putting them on a plane and hoping for the best. And that's resonating right across every industry that we serve now.
Yes, gentleman there, back.
Thank you very much. This is a question for Athina and Rubina, but in general for the whole panel. We've talked a lot about technological shifts, and often you need more than one stakeholder to really pull their weight. We've also spoken about how governments are coming in to help. Can you speak a little bit about what the private sector can specifically do, and how different organizations should, in your opinion, come together to make 5G or electric vehicles or whatever come to fruition?
So, in my opinion, one basic step is, first of all, train the audience. That means help to provide more information to the public, to the audience, to everyone, what this kind of technology, each kind of technology is, so that they can slowly engage to it, want it, let's say, and start actually using it, because the technology evolves much faster after using it. We have this kind of technologies. We've been working with immersive technology. I'm sure the other people here are also know the fact that this technology can only be evolved after the feedback of users, after we actually put it working, because we have been testing. Yes, we have some use cases and we actually work with this technology, but let's face it, it's not mainstream yet. So the first thing is that we have to introduce these technologies to the public. And then as companies, we need some kind, let's say, of support, such as investment supports and connections, so that we can, all of us, make these technologies come to mainstream. So I believe the industry is not ready yet for competitions, or is not at all competitive. We all want the same thing. We want the technology to develop more.
Yes, I completely agree with you. I think customer centricity is something that a lot of private companies can also help with, because they're actually going out there and talking to the end customers and understanding what the customer wants. And along the whole journey, I think that's something where they can collaborate and help drive the industry forward together. The other thing I think is often what we see is, like with technology, with whether it's EVs, whether it's 5G, with data, regulations also play an important role, and usually technology is much ahead of regulations. But I think, and a lot of the time it's the private companies that are driving it, so I think if they can collaborate more with the government there, maybe we could see regulations along with technology and they can help each other. So I think that's one of the other areas that they could work together in.
No. One last question, because I think we are slightly overrunning. Yep, at the back.
So Andrew, you said something that I found very interesting about the if you imagine if you scratch your arm and then you can call your mom. Actually, sort of something that I find in equal measures extremely exciting and very terrifying is, I think it's called transhumanism, so the idea of integrating tech into people. So I know we've talked about some of the really cool, exciting things we expect to see with VR in the next 10 years. Bionic humans, long term, what does the panel think? Is that something that you think we could see, or is it completely, totally mad?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, it's already happened. It's already happening. So there are many devices in medicine that are built into you rather than you wear on the outside of your body. You know, whether it's hearing aids or things to control heart rates and such like. So I think once that extends outside of something that's got pure medical grounds and starts to be much more about consumerism, I think you'll start to see a rapid pace heading in that direction. I mean, are we going to end up in a world of cyborgs? I don't know, but you could reasonably say that prosthetics is going to move in such a rapid evolution that the leg will effectively be a robotic leg in every sense and will respond and behave just like a human leg in every sense. So I think that that's going to start to take us forward. And then, you know, this article that I read was, when it was talking about phones, was actually saying that the phone just gets built into you rather than it's on the outside of your body. And you know, even things like augmented reality is a type of sort of enhanced reality. So I think as long as consumers are happy that their data is not going to disappear down the wrong place, and they're happy with the idea of having things built into them, I could reasonably see that that's going to happen. You can all go home and watch Terminator now.
And Lucy, on the VR front, you could see how, with VR and getting integrated, that could be also. What's your view on this?
I think there's probably a step in between when there's kind of more wearable devices that's already beginning to happen. But I think, it's possible, and it can definitely come in. I think there's a few steps along the way, but I think it will. Yeah, I can see the future in that.
Right, so we're really speaking about the future here. Thank you very much to our panel, who have been fantastic and have been telling us